Divine love makes us be true to ourselves and to others. It makes us live honestly, comprehending that God Himself is infinite honesty. Divine love is the solution to all our difficulties and problems. It frees us from every kind of binding. It makes us speak truly, think truly, and act truly. It makes us feel one with the whole universe. Divine love purifies our hearts and glorifies our being.
Please, Baba, could we have more?
Yeah.
Another helping of divine love.
Chapter 6, The Duality of the Universe. The life of Saint Francis of Assisi has beautifully exemplified the fact that the universal indwelling spirit is in everything and has its highest expression in divine love. His superconscious contact with the animals or subhuman races gave him an extraordinary influence, for perfect masters have dominion over all things. The story of how the saint tamed the bad wolf of Gubbio is looked upon as a charming legend. The wolf was terrorizing the inhabitants of the little mountain town of Gubbio, carrying off animals and children. So bold and cunning was the beast that the people besought the saint to come to their rescue. One day, as the holy man was on his way to the forest to find the wolf, it suddenly appeared without warning, tearing down the mountainside. St. Francis was followed by some of his monks and timorous townsfolk who witnessed the following amazing spectacle. The saint stopped the wolf, spoke to it, and reproached it for its nefarious activities. To the astonishment of the onlookers, the wolf immediately grew calm and prostrated itself before St. Francis. According to tradition, the wolf then became one of the saint's most devoted followers, and finally, the pet of the neighborhood. But this is not just an unfounded legend, as we might imagine. Some years ago, Mr. Harold Goad, director of the British Institute at Florence, told an interesting story about this very same wolf. One day, he was watching some repairs being done to the Church of San Francisco in Gubbio. The workmen, uncovering a part of the floor before the altar, found the unexpected remains of the wolf, testifying that the animal had died revered by all, since it had been buried in the church. It is known in India that even tigers will respond to love. It's a footnote. A little bit further for the footnote.
Well, you don't see it. It's square in the middle of the screen.
Oh, I see. I thought that was still the text. Yes, I do see it.
Oh.
Here is the footnote. Reader's Digest, October 1953, gives a condensed article from the American Mercury, in which the author, Alan DeVoe, tells how a friend of his, who had spent many years in India, described a certain monastery in the Himalayan foothills. It was in the middle of tiger-infested country. The monks are not afraid. They believe that love can cast out fear and invite love in return. They are friendly with the tigers and talk to them. The abbot can be seen going out on the veranda in his yellow robe in the dusk and talking tiger talk, until out of the jungle comes a big striped cat. And presently, the tiger settles down and purrs under the abbot's stroking hand.
Be interesting to hear a tiger purr.
We must repeat once more that God is latently conscious in nature and only becomes fully conscious in man. That is to say, when the highest state of human consciousness is completely freed from the duality of creation or Maya, then the union with the real self can be consummated. As we have already said, there are very few who attain to the ultimate reality and afterwards remain alive for long, as they are unable to contain the flooding of the spirit. This final transcendental initiation usually occurs when the ego is about to vacate its earthly dwelling place. But on the other hand, those who do have the supreme initiation and nevertheless continue to live, retaining normal consciousness, might be described as having passed through the second death or the mystical rebirth. Saint Francis and other saints have spoken of the second death. Only a master of consciousness knows how the transformation of the ego takes place. Such a divine event is entirely beyond our understanding. But Jesus might have alluded to this when explaining to Nicodemus about being born again. Quote, "Except one be born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God." End quote. That is to say, he becomes one with God and shares his kingdom. Quote, "That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit." End quote. The spiritual meaning of these words implies realization of God by human consciousness, which is completed only in life and in human form and not after death. We sometimes hear a great spiritual teacher say he is one with life, meaning he has reached a certain stage of development in which he has felt the unity of being. We may also hear of a great teacher who says he is God. Such an expression is more common in the East than in the West, where it would be much understood. Let me repeat that. Such an expression is more common in the East than in the West, where it would be much misunderstood. To say, quote, "I am God," end quote, or, quote, "I have the Christ consciousness," end quote, is not necessarily blasphemous. In those words lie the majesty of pantheistic glory and the truth of the eternal divine ego, which is within us all. For those who can triumphantly rise above the shackles of the flesh into the boundless space of the spirit, such truths are real. But there should be a warning here. For not until the aspirant has transcended Maya will he have reached self-realization, which belongs only to the seventh plane of consciousness. So although a man may say he is God and may claim to have divine revelation, he may as yet still not be near ultimate perfection. We have said that in initiations, there is always a lifting of the sevenfold veil drawn over the mind, an opening of the inner senses, giving glimpses of the higher realms and empyrean heights of the soul. These revelations are always the same, varying little in detail or degree, though the initiates may have lived in different times and climes. We know it is characteristic of those who have attained to some form of illumination, though by no means reaching the fullness of self-realization, to have a vision or experience lasting only a few seconds, but showing that time and space bear no relation to the higher spheres of spiritual existence. Let us now consider the, quote, I am God, end quote, initiation, in which it is realized that man's highest purpose in life is to be united with his real self, the oversoul. A friend told me about this tremendous event. He is a highly advanced man, probably nearing the end of his journey through creation. The initiation lasted the long period of 3 days and 3 nights and very nearly killed him, for his physical vehicle had not been stepped up to the high rate of spiritual frequency required for such a state of cosmic awareness, or, as the masters say, quote, the time was not yet ripe for the final consummation, end quote. He told me that it was the most wonderful, but at the same time, the most terrifying experience of his life. He felt that at any moment his body might be torn asunder, bursting with the cosmic strain imposed upon it. It felt as if it were being pulled in all directions, being stretched out to the uttermost, as if it could not contain the life and rush of the spirit. In this greatest of all initiations, bordering upon self-realization, which cannot be fully accomplished without the aid of a perfect master, close paren, my friend knew that he sustained everything, that he was in everything, that he gave life to everything, and that he loved everything. He felt that the sun, moon, planets, and stars were all coming out of him, and that reality was neither good nor bad, but existence. He saw the whole immense universe dwindle like a speck on his being. It was as if he could put his finger on it and wipe it out. When a man has this cosmic state of illumination and is transcending creation, he then knows the universe to be an illusion or Maya, and it vanishes as the morning mist. He might easily have died, but now, provided he meets a perfect master, he should, in all probability, become self-realized in the coming fresh awakening of the spirit. Meher Baba explained that after regaining creation consciousness, a perfect master, quote, beholds countless numbers of suns, moons, stars, and planets issuing out of himself, end quote. Another quote, the whole universe is in the self and springs into existence from a tiny point in the self, which is referred to as Om. But the self has become habituated to gathering experiences through one medium or other, and therefore it comes to experience the universe as a formidable rival other than itself. Those who have realized God and regained consciousness plus God consciousness can constantly see the universe as springing from the Om point, which is in everyone. Close quote. And there's a asterisk. Discourses of Meher Baba. The Eastern philosophical concept of the spiritual aspect of creation is that the whole universe, known and unknown, has come out of a point in the microcosm, which may be called the creation point. At the same moment, simultaneously along with emanation of creation, two other processes came into play: evolution and production. The difference between the two, as Meher Baba has explained, is significant and should be clearly understood. The process of production is dependent upon the process of evolution in sequence of causation, but not in sequence of time. Evolution depends on the creation point for cause, but production signifies material growth and change, which is organic and inorganic. Astronomers, as the results of finding with the Palomar 200-inch mirror, now estimate the age of the known universe to be between 4 and 5,000 million years. And some say that if it has always expanded at the rate it is now expanding, all matter must have originally sprung from, quote, one tiny point. And there's a footnote after 4 and 5,000 million years. And that is at the 116th annual meeting of the British Association, Dr. E.D. Adrian put the time back to 6,000 million years ago.
So that's 6 billion.
Oh, right.
6,000 million, right? Yeah. And
Ah.
now I think people think it's something like 12 billion.
Uh-huh. Dr. Shapley says this estimate brings the age of the universe into line with the maximum age which has been calculated from rocks discovered on the surface of the Earth. Would that not enable us to assume that the Earth is the oldest planet in our universe? Scientists now think that if we have a curved, expanding, relativistic universe, its age must be reconciled with that of our Earth. In an article in the Daily Telegraph, July 14th, 1953, Sir Harold Spencer Jones, Astronomer Royal, writing of the cosmic nickel found on the ocean bed and of the particles which fall from the sky to the ground as micrometeorites, concludes that they, quote, must come from the primordial dust, the surviving relics of the original debris left over when the solar system was formed, close quote. Does not that again suggest a beginning and an end? But only provided that the whole universe came into being simultaneously. Here we might refer to another scientific view of creation. In 1952, the American Geophysical Union at Washington was told by two Johns Hopkins scientists that creation took only about 30 minutes, some 5,000 million years ago. They said that something, which they cannot explain, acted as a trigger. And in that brief period, the three basic elementary particles, neutrons, protons, and electrons, were fused by intense heat into the existing 92 elements. The, quote, neutron fluid, close quote, which suddenly expanded using a mechanical brain at the Bureau of Standards, they calculated what the ratio of the heavier elements would be on their hypothesis and found the results were about the same as the known ratio. In the Daily Telegraph, July 10th, 1954, we see that a stir has been caused among US physicists about an atomic particle, apparently from outer space, which it is estimated moved at a speed and energy of 10,000 billion volts. The photographic record having been made by Dr. Marcel Shine of the University of Chicago, who reported his discovery to the American Physical Society. In referring to this atomic particle, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer said, quote, "It is trying to tell us something if we could only read and understand it. Just what the particle is and what force it possesses, nobody knows. When we understand what it is, we will understand a lot more about the nature of physics," end quote. For scientists, the implication of this new discovery is that somewhere in the universe, there exists a means of annihilating or converting into energy all the various kinds of matter known on Earth. In Explorations in Science by Waldemar Kempfert, the science editor of the New York Times, the doubt and uncertainty prevailing in physics today is shown. For scientists appear to be divided as to whether our universe is closed, relativistic, and expanding. That is to say, have we, quote, a closed universe from which matter wraps space round itself in the Einsteinian way, a universe which is blowing up like a soap bubble, close quote. Dr. Hubble's epoch-making discovery with the 100-inch Mount Wilson telescope established, quote, that the farthest nebulae, then amenable to spectroscopic analysis, were rushing away at the sensational speed of 24,000 miles a second. This is just what ought to happen if the nebulae were spots on a cosmic soap bubble blown up by titanic invisible lungs, end quote. Quote, there is hope that with the aid of the 200-inch mirror of Palomar, the message which the spectra of the outer nebulae are sending will be read. Space, continuing the quote, and as Dr. Hubble says, a choice is presented, as once before in the days of Copernicus, between a strangely small finite universe and a sensibly infinite universe, plus a new principle of nature, end quote. Again, we quote from the same book the following significant paragraph, quote, the Bohr-Dirac-Heisenberg School of Scientists studied equations that were supposed to reveal the secrets of the atom and hence of reality, only to find that reality had vanished and that trees, houses, and stars were not what they seemed to be, but only indications or pointer findings of a deeper something that was real, something that science could never reach. End quote. And Kaempfert goes on to ask, quote, is it just a coincidence that the same uncertainty prevails in art, in economics, and in international relations? End quote. Of course, it must not be forgotten, however, that the procedures of such mathematical physicists are expedients and not intended to be final solutions of this age-old problem. Also, that cause and effect play no part in atomic physics. The scientist is not concerned with the purpose of creation. He asks not why, but how. And when religion and philosophy attempt to explain questions, he has no way of answering. He replies that he cannot understand mystical conceptions, which he asserts are based on faith and belief and not on reason. Here we beg to differ to the extent of asking, what is faith and belief? True faith and true belief are born of illumination, which in itself is something outside and beyond the scope of the ordinary limited human mind. Scientists naturally have difficulty in accepting philosophical premises relating to our transitory world and the cosmos, as metaphysical concepts cannot be reached by methods acceptable to the experimental rules of science. This, unfortunately, seems to be a difficulty which can never be overcome because of the inherently dual nature of the universe. Also, the existence of Maya is never sufficiently considered by science, which seems as yet unaware of the essentially illusory nature of the material creation. It is therefore useless to pay serious attention to modern theories relating to the cosmology and astronomy of our times. For as we know, scientific concepts about the universe are always in a state of flux. None of them bears any relation to the ancient and eternal conception of the cosmos emerging into manifestation, going through a vast cycle of evolution, and then returning to non-manifestation. Quote, the days and nights of Brahm, close quote. We understand that the word Brahm denotes God in the impersonal sense, and Brahma stands for the creator or personal God. Meher Baba has said that one who understands Maya understands half the universe. The universe is essentially dual in its relationship to man, and the operative laws in question are karma and Maya. There's a footnote. Karma might be described as the sum of a person's actions in one of his previous states of existence, viewed as deciding his destiny in the next life. See Chapter 8. The great difficulty in grasping such a concept in its totality is that it would necessitate a full explanation of the cosmic scheme. This is no ordinary man, however great his intelligence and intellect can master, because he remains always unable to formulate his ideas, since he has not transcended the limitations of the human mind, ergo, always held in the grip of Maya. Then again, all cosmic conjectures being outside the scope of the human intellect, it is not possible even for a master to explain, except by means of his grace and enlightenment, which are beyond the limits of the human mind or false ego, and so inexplicable in words. Once, when asked whether material science in the near or remote future would be able to probe into the subtle and higher planes of existence, since at the present rate of scientific progress, it ought to be possible, if there be continuity or point of fusion from matter to the finer aspects of matter, Meher Baba gave the following answer, quote, "The soul, essentially divine, infinite in existence, knowledge, and bliss, is all by itself the only reality. Everything else exists only in imagination. The famous and oft-repeated parable of the snake and the rope will elucidate the point. The soul somehow imagined the rope to be the snake. This phase engendered fear, which, to stretch the simile further, we may call mind. The mind extended itself to grasp it, the snake. This is energy. The actually grasping it means body. Thus we see mind, energy, body, although all three have no existence except in imagination. But in relation to each other, they are altogether distinct, separate, and independent. Although mind emanates energy, and energy in essence is mind, nevertheless, in expression and form, both are distinct and apart. Similarly, body is the outcome of energy, and though identical in essence, the function and formation is radically different and independent. To illustrate the point further, let us take thread to be mind, and cloth made thereof to represent energy, and clothing to signify body. The cloth here is of thread, but in utility and form is altogether different from thread. The clothing, say a coat, is from thread, but in form and expression is obviously and distinctly apart from cloth and thread. The making of cloth and coat is easy and possible, but the return of the coat and cloth to the state of the original thread means the destruction and annihilation of the form and expression of both. Similarly, the emanation of energy and matter from mind is automatic and natural. But the return of matter and energy to mind is almost impossible. This return factor is the beginning of spirituality. You must have felt by now your question answered by realizing how impossible it is for science to probe into the subtle and higher planes. Science is, as yet, a very long way off. It has, up to now, only touched the fringe of matter. It may, at the most, touch the extreme limits of matter, but that will take ages. And who can, till then, vouchsafe for the integrity of this, the present civilization?
Should I take a turn? Let
Yes.
us continue to quote some other words of Meher Baba as they give the real explanation of this problem. Quote, "The divine, which constitutes infinite power, wisdom, love, and bliss, is independent eternally. The whole mental, subtle, and gross existence, which in itself is illusion, was latent in this infinite, parentheses, like shadow being latent in substance, close parentheses. This latent illusion manifested itself as the mental, subtle, and gross planes. The mental phenomena depend on the independent eternal law of God. The subtle depends on the mental, and the gross depends upon the subtle. Thus, matter is controlled by energy, and energy is controlled by mind. God, who is beyond intellect and mind, upholds the whole illusory phenomena by his all in all, infinite, self-sustaining knowledge. The law of karma governs evolution, reincarnation, and spiritual advancement. Likewise, the divine law of reality governs the whole phenomena of gross, subtle, and mental illusion. Thus, nothing is haphazard, and the whole cosmic existence of substance and shadow, of intelligence and imagination, of God and the universe is governed and controlled by the everlasting, unchanging, divine law of unity. What we want to make clear is that the process of evolution, reincarnation, and spiritual advancement is so linked with soul realization that in the end it is found that cause, effect, time, space, birth and death, suffering and happiness are all mere imagination. Dr. Einstein wrote an article, My Faith, in a Bombay paper, Blitz, 30th September 1950, in which he gave his views on the nature of cosmic religion. In this article, Dr. Einstein traced the history of religion through three distinct stages, viz. 1, religion of fear, 2, social or moral religion, and finally, 3, cosmic religion. When the great scientist expounded his views on cosmic religion, he was treading on unsafe and unexplored ground, as Dr. A.G. Munsif revealed in replying to Dr. Einstein in the columns of Blitz. Quote, 3, cosmic religion. Concerning the sources of the first 2 stages of the growth of religion, I think none can disagree. They are just the picture of the development of the mind of man adjusting itself to environments and circumstances. It is only in dealing with the 3rd stage of what he calls cosmic religion that Einstein flounders and is evidently found to be less informed and authoritative. Einstein has unwittingly huddled together all the 3 types, the philosopher, the scientist, and the saint, into one category as believers in cosmic religion, without clarifying their distinctive outlook towards creation and the creator. Insofar as these three types have risen above dogma and the anthropomorphic idea of God, they may be said to belong to cosmic religion. But there is a world of difference in their endeavor to arrive at reality. Dr. Munsif continues, in the language of science pertaining to cosmic religion, a scientist's research is analytical. A philosopher's research is synthetical. And a saint's research is harmonical. In philosophic parlance, a scientist's approach to God is empirical. A philosopher's approach to God is conceptual, and a saint's approach to God is perceptual. In spiritual, saintly terminology, a scientist's investigation of truth is materialistic. A philosopher's investigation is rational, and a saint's investigation is spiritual. The best efforts on the part of a philosopher in understanding truth end in agnosticism. But science, in its unbridled pride, claims that God, if there be one, must answer the laboratory tests. No wonder the established religions are antagonistic to science. Who can gainsay the poignant fact that till now, science has done more harm to the peace and progress of the world than the good it promises? Science, even if it avoids landing itself in atheism, can never successfully practice Einstein's cosmic religion. The endeavor of science to arrive at truth by probing into the heart of matter is misconceived and therefore bound to end in disaster. The monster of Frankenstein, the atomic or hydrogen bomb, the creation of science, is already threatening the world with colossal ruin and destruction. It is therefore wrong for Einstein to say that cosmic religious experience is the strongest and the noblest driving force behind scientific research. A highly developed and analytical intellect, as that possessed by a scientist, should not be mixed up with ideas on cosmic religion. Want to take another turn, Marianne?
If you choose, yes.
Yes, please.
Quote, truly speaking, the saints have no religion worth the name. And if, along with Einstein, we were to take this class as belonging to cosmic religion, then it must be admitted that they have altogether a different technique of practicing it. To a saint, the study of man, the microcosm, is in itself a complete answer to the macrocosm, which embraces and includes all the planes of consciousness and existence, including God. citing a contemporary that the only deeply religious people of our largely materialistic age are the earnest men of research, Einstein has evidently misapplied the quotation. He ought to know that the truly religious people, or the earnest men of research, are the saints who try to probe into the domain of the spirit, and not the scientists who probe into the realm of matter. End quote. As an Indian friend wrote to me recently, quote, if Einstein the scientist begins to believe in a conceptual understanding of Maya, he will cease to be the scientist. If a perceptual understanding is forced upon him, he might turn into a must, let's say, God-mad person, and the world would lose an intellectual giant. If Einstein the man opens his eyes, he is likely to turn into a great saint. One day, he is bound to open his eyes, if not in this life, then in another. The more we understand about truth, so far as the intellect goes, the more we should realize the depth of our ignorance. Unfortunately, in proportion to the brilliance of our conceptual grasp of A to Z about truth, save that it is truth, is dimmed more and more. Therefore, unless we can begin to appreciate that the more we know, the more we know not, we are apt to lapse into deeper ignorance.
Oh, could you go again from unfortunately?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in proportion to the brilliance of our conceptual grasp of A to Z about truth, the primary fact that there is nothing like A to Z about truth, save that it is truth, is dimmed more and more. Therefore, unless we can begin to appreciate that the more we know not, we are apt to lapse into deeper ignorance. The final involution of all matter is called Mahapralaya. After that, there remains nothing. That is, nothing until such times as God has another thought. For cannot the universe be described as his thought? Or rather, until such time as he again becomes conscious of himself as creator. And what do we mean by, quote, nothing? We read in Dr. Donkin's book, The Wayfarers, that, quote, zero is equal to nothing, and yet the very fact of its non-value makes it the important factor in arriving at valuations. Thus, if the figure 1, O-N-E, 1, is taken to represent the unity and reality of God, and the cipher 0, the unreality of the material universe, we may add as many zeros, that is, material universes, as we choose to the single figure 1, God, and so make combinations that have significance, such as 10, 100, a lakh, a crore, and so forth. In other words, the cipher 0, or the material universe, in itself, or combined with others like itself, is nothing, means nothing, but when it has the figure 1, that's God, in front of it, the various combinations have distinct values. close quote. The deeper universal metaphysics of Eastern wisdom are applicable in their intrinsic purity to all the other religious doctrines. That is why India is called the mother of wisdom, since all the religious teachings were conceived in her womb. Most scholars tie themselves up endlessly into knots on the subject of nothing and on the principle of contradiction. If the reader is interested in the higher metaphysics of the Hindu tradition, Dr. Mascarenta's little book, The Quintessence of Hinduism, although learned, is most concise and clear in its appreciation of the finer points of the doctrine of the infinite. He says that it is necessary to understand the fourfold division of, in quotes, nothing, in order to avoid the superficial misinterpretations current among the generality of Orientalists and Indologists. In expounding the doctrine of Abhava and Anantava, he explains that the nearest equivalent to Abhava in European speech would be the English nothing, in parens, no thing. He continues that we find not one, but 4 species of nothing recognized. Absolute nothing, Adyantabhava, previous nothing, Pragabhava, subsequent nothing, Pradvamsabhava, and exclusive nothing, Anyan Ibabhava. CF. So it's referring to CF dot Tarka Sangraha 11.7.
Not familiar with it.
I'm not either. In the West, philosophy so often degenerates into a, quote, empty play of words, end quote, because Westerners are not conversant with the deeper realities of Eastern thought. In the same way, the scientist today uses the term infinite in the wrong sense. Hence, we again quote at length from Dr. Mascarenta's work. The real infinite, which excludes only absolute nothing, is illimited absolutely and is outside the range of the measurable in any sense, being transcendentally beyond all categories and full with fullness, incomprehensible and ineffable. In Hindu doctrine, creation is said to be not out of absolute nothing, but out of previous nothing. Creation is understood among the Hindus as polar, not to the contradiction explicit in absolute nothing, but to the rich possibility implicit in previous nothing. That is, not to Adyantabhava, but to Pragabhava, not to nihilum absolutum, but to nihilum antecedens. The Tarka Sangraha is clear on the point. Creation is polar to previous nothing. Close quote. Summing up, we must say that the doctrine of creation, as popularly expounded, is inadmissible because in that exposition, the term nothing is loosely employed to cover also absolute nothing. In such an exposition, we encounter a confusion of thought and expression that is very much to be deplored. If, on the contrary, we restrict nothing in the special sense of pragabhava to previous nothing or pure possibility, then creation becomes not only a reality amenable to theological treatment, but a reality in metaphysics appropriate and necessary as the only course of self-manifestation. Paren, sva praka sattvam. Close paren. See, the sentence concludes with open, comma, in the beginning, AGRC, to the infinite.
Dunno. That's a puzzle. Let's stop at this point. Actually, it's a great point, and we'll repeat the sentence next
right.
next time. So this is let's just check the page. 136.
Is the